Good morning, Team Anastasis. Happy Friday. I just have to tell you how proud I am of all of you for just your great attitudes this week as we pivoted really quickly to online learning for 14 days of quarantine. And I'm just could not be more proud of how you all handled it, the way that you're showing up every day, and the joy that you're still bringing each other. So well done. 5 days down, five more to go. I'm really looking forward to seeing you all again. But in the meantime, I'm going to tell you a story. So when I was about seventh grade, I think, my family traveled to England, and we did that a lot when I was growing up because I have an aunt and uncle who live in England, and they have a bed and breakfast in England that if we could find a cheap flight, British Airways used to do like $99 flights. That is so not a thing anymore. But when we could find a cheap flight, my mom would book tickets. She'd stay up all night calling the airline because there was no internet to just hop on and book a flight. So she'd stay up all night calling and calling and calling, trying to get through. And then it was like a huge celebration in the morning when we got tickets and we knew we got to go to England. And so one summer when I was seventh or eighth grade, I think it was seventh, so I would have been 12, we were headed to England in June to see my aunt and uncle. And my mom decided that during this trip, we would take the channel from England to France and we would explore France while we were there as well. So we got to go and see my aunt and uncle, which I always loved, staying at their house because they have this great cottage in England and one of the rare places in England that they have a pool in their backyard. Not very common, but I loved going and visiting and spending the summer there and exploring castles and just doing things that we didn't normally do when we were in Colorado for the summer. So we went over, we were all really excited, and we were so excited to go to France and stay in Paris. And we were going to end our Paris trip with a trip to Euro Disney, which is in Paris. And so we were extra excited, my brother and I, about that. So we rode the Channel from England all the way to France. And the Channel is like a train that goes underground. So it's like you're in a tunnel, and there's a part of it that actually goes underneath the water to get from France to Paris, because I don't know if you know this, but there's water in between those two places. So it actually goes underneath the water and you're in this like tunnel thing, and it's a super fast train, but it still takes time to get there. So we had spent most of the day riding the Channel, and we got to Paris right around dinner time, I would say. And as soon as you got off the Channel, you're like hit by this, like it was so hot. It was like 10 million degrees. And we were getting cranky, my brother and I. My brother at the time was 6, maybe 7. And so he was getting crabby, and we were hungry and tired and just ready to be at our hotel. And so we get off the Channel and we all have our luggage, our suitcases. And my dad goes and looks at the Metro board to find out how we're going to get to our hotel. And he's trying to ask people questions, but of course he does not speak French. And so he's asking questions, and finally he figures out what line of the Metro we're supposed to get on. So it's so hot, it's so miserable, it's humid, and we've got our heavy bags and we're just done with the day already. But my dad finally figures it out. So we go to the line where we're supposed to be for the Metro, and we hop on the Metro, and we're standing room only because it was pretty packed and full because it's dinner time in Paris and people have places to go. And I'll never forget, because we had to hold on to the bar because there was no room to sit down. And I was right at that height where just hairy armpits as far as the eyes could see, like right in my face. Very sweaty, hairy armpits. And I was not impressed, and I was getting very crabby and very cranky. And my brother was like starting to have a little bit of a tantrum and like a meltdown. But finally we get to our stop and we get off and come back above ground, and we start looking for our hotel, and still all the luggage carrying around. And we cannot for the life of us find this darn hotel. Like, I don't know if my dad had no idea what he was doing reading a map. I don't know why we couldn't find it, but we were wandering around the streets of Paris for what felt like forever. And at this point, it's starting to get dark outside. We still have not eaten dinner. We're still hot and tired and miserable, and we're still carrying heavy bags. And so now we're wandering the streets of Paris looking for this hotel. So my dad gets frustrated, I'm sure because my brother was whining. I don't think I dared say anything because I didn't want to, set anybody off or get in trouble. But my brother was definitely like starting to full on meltdown. And so my dad like barks at us um, to stay put. But at this point, we're like in the middle of uh, on a little island, like in the middle of a road. And so he is like, stay put, don't move. And he just starts walking off. And my mom says, Jim, where are you going? And he just says, stay there. And at this point, I'm like starting to get kind of nervous. And like, dad's gone off the deep end. Are we going to see him again? Like, he's so tired of listening to us whine about why we're not finding this hotel. So he finally figures out where it is. And it's just up the street, and I don't know how we missed it, but so we grab all the bags, we cross the street, we walk up to the hotel, and my mom tries the door and it's locked. Like, that's weird. This is a hotel. Why is the door locked? And so my dad's like, stay here. I'm going to go around the building and we'll see if it's unlocked on the other side. Maybe, it's a weird France thing and they put their front doors on the back or something. So he walks around and tries every single door on this hotel. Every one of them is locked. And at this point, my mom has the bright idea to pull out a little pocket translator, like a book, because again, there was no cell phones or anything at this point. So there's no smartphone, there's no like Google Maps telling us where to go. We're literally using paper maps and like books that are translator books. So she sees this sign on the door, and the sign says, closed forever, and no other explanation, just closed forever. So we're supposed to be at this hotel. We're supposed to be like settling in and have a place to stay. And it's at this point that my mom realizes that we are in Paris. It's creeping on like 8 p.m. with 2 kids. We don't know where we are. We have no other alternatives to know like where to go, because again, no cell phone to say like, where's the nearest hotel? We don't speak the language, which was not great. And my dad is like wandering around checking doors. And so she was nervous to tell him when he came back around. And so here he comes walking back around the building. And my mom starts giggling, like uncontrollable laughter. And my brother Mike and I were looking at her like, what on earth? Like, you're losing your mind. What are you laughing about? And my dad comes around and he's like, why are you Chancey, why are you laughing? And she's like, it's closed for us. And he's like, this is not funny. And she's like, it's such an adventure. Think of the stories that we'll have to tell. It's an adventure. So we ended up hailing down. Actually, I think first we took a bus to the other side of Paris to try and, my dad wanted to get as far away from this closed hotel as possible. So we went to the other side of Paris. And the bus driver was angry at him because I think he wasn't giving him enough change. And so finally he just like takes all of the money out of his pocket and holds it. And the bus driver just takes a lot of money. But he had no idea how much it was supposed to be. And we didn't speak each other's language. So we got on the bus, all of our luggage. We went to the other side of Paris, got off at some bus stop and where we saw a hotel. And my dad walks in and says, we've got 2 kids, 2 adults, we need a hotel room. And they said, I'm sorry, we're booked full. There's no hotel room. And so at this point, we're all starting to panic. And my mom is still laughing, like just thinks this is the funniest joke she's ever heard. So we finally ask the nice front desk people at this hotel if they can recommend another hotel. And they say, oh yes, we've got another hotel in our same chain. Would you like us to call a cab? So my dad is like, yes, call us a cab and we will like get in this. And he says, can you set up a room for us so that when we get there, we know we have a room? And so they were very nice and set up this room for us. So we get in this cab with a crazy French cab driver who drove on the street and the sidewalk and drove very quickly. And what we realized is that the person at the front desk kept saying, "Are you sure you want a cab? Are you sure you want a cab?" And my dad's like, "Yes." And they were like, "Okay," but they were looking at us strange. And the reason was because the other hotel was literally around the corner. Like it would have been so much faster to walk than to get in this cab with this crazy cab driver who thought it was appropriate to drive on sidewalks. While people ran out of his way. So he kept yelling about Americans, and I'm sure he was saying something not great about how we were entering his cab, and probably that we were crazy for needing a cab to go like around the corner. So we finally get to the hotel and sign in at the front desk, and we're so relieved because finally we have a room. By now it's like 9 p.m., maybe 10 or 11. It's getting late at night and we still have not eaten dinner. So we go up to the hotel room, and the hotel room is perfectly nice. It looks very quaint and nice, like a French hotel room should. But there is no air conditioning. And as I said, it's like a million-degree day in Paris. So it is so hot. And my dad decides if we're going to be able to sleep tonight, we need to like cool this place down. So he opens the one and only room in the window, which is like this teeny tiny room. And he opens it up, and outside of the window is this like 16-lane highway, and it is so loud and insane, and there's no breeze, so it's not cooling anything off. So my mom is still laughing, and she's like, "It's gonna be fine, we'll figure it out, don't worry about it." And she says, "Why don't we go down and have dinner at the hotel so we don't have to look for a restaurant at this hour?" With two kids who were cranky and hungry. So we went down to the hotel restaurant, and they were just closing the kitchen at this point. And but my dad begged them, like, "Can we please we will eat whatever you have left over. We'll eat anything." And so they said, "Well, we closed the kitchen, but we do have this buffet that you can, eat at this buffet." And so my dad said, "Great, that sounds great." So we we ate for dinner bread, because there was bread left over, and chocolate mousse because there was chocolate mousse left over, and that was about it in this and a 7 Up, and I was very happy for the 7 Up. My brother was like crying because he didn't want to eat any of the things in this buffet, which was literally two things. And so one of the sweet hotel staff came out and said, "Would you like me to make you a cheeseburger?" And my brother was like, "Yes, make me a cheeseburger." So they made a cheeseburger, which turned out to be like a burnt hockey puck of a piece of beef with a piece of cheese on it. And my brother was not impressed, and my mom like started taking pictures and thought this was the greatest day of her life, and said over and over, like, "What a great adventure, and just think of the stories we'll have to tell when we get back home." My mom is famous for being able to turn anything around like that and have a positive attitude and a positive perspective on things. And the reason I tell you that story is because next week we are going to start looking at parables from the New Testament. And parables are really just stories. And sometimes the best way to tell something that is true is actually not to state it as a fact, but rather to tell it as a story. Because as you're telling a story, you can picture yourself and you can empathize differently. You can put yourself, maybe as I was telling that story, you put yourself in my position of what it would be like to like watch your mom lose her mind and your dad freak out and your brother melt down. Or maybe you're the little brother in the family and you were thinking, "Yeah, I would have totally thrown a fit if that was happening." Maybe you're more like my mom and you're super optimistic. And so no matter what comes your way, you're like, "What a great adventure we're on." And maybe you're more like my dad and you're just like so frustrated and so grumpy and just want something to eat and a cool place to like lay down and go to bed. And So a parable is brilliant, a brilliant way to tell a truth because it gives you something to connect with that you wouldn't otherwise connect with. I could have told you in very short two words or less. Perspective is important and attitude is everything, right? I could have told you something like that. But after telling you that story, you can put yourself in that position and go, yeah, if I am in that position in Paris, the character I would most like to be is actually my mom because she was having a great time and her perspective was totally different. So as we listen to and talk about parables next week, it's going to be really important for you to, one, connect with the story, and then two, look for what truth is this story trying to help me understand in a better way. And the beauty of stories is that they're easy to remember, they're easy to pass down. So in a culture that Jesus was in, there wasn't, not everybody had a Bible or the Torah is what they called the Old Testament at that time. Um, they didn't have those scrolls in everybody's house. Most people did not have those. So everything was really oral tradition. And the best way to help people remember something is through story. And so a lot of these parables were meant to teach very important truths, but they did it through stories so that you had something to connect with, something you could retell, something memorable. And so next week, we'll start going through some of those parables. We'll look through what truth is being told to us through those parables. And then as a result, we'll look at what part of God's character is revealed in this story. What does it tell us about the nature of who God is, of who Jesus is? So I am excited to start looking at those with you next week. I hope you have a really great weekend. I hope that today maybe you're thinking of some stories in your family that you tell, every time you meet someone new, they hear that kind of story about your family. Our Paris trip is one that has been told a lot in our family because that craziness did not end. Our whole trip to Paris is kind of like that. So maybe you have family stories like that, traditions that you tell, and lessons that you learned out of those experiences. So I would love for you, if you have one of those, to maybe share with your classmates what that story is. If you don't have one, that's okay. Sometimes we don't think about that, we don't think about them as stories to retell until we hear somebody else's story, and then it kind of prompts our own. So if you do have a story that you learned a great lesson from, or maybe you have a story that your grandparents have told you to teach you a lesson, let's talk about those today. I hope you have a great weekend, and we will see you on Monday.